You know, most people go through life aiming at nothing and hit it with amazing accuracy. And they find themselves just feeling stuck in a rut, wondering if this is all there is. And I'm here to tell you, no, it is not. And life is too dang short to live it stuck in a rut. So check out beyondtherut.com and listen to episodes of other people who are also feeling stuck in a rut, asking themselves the same questions you are around their faith, their family, their fitness, their finances, and just their outlook on future possibility. And there, we hope that you are encouraged and inspired to make your own path and live life beyond the rut. So again, go check out beyondtherut.com, where you can find blog posts and podcast episodes, as well as some tools to help you design the targets you wish to hit in life in those 5 F's: faith, family, fitness, finances, and future possibility. Because again, life is too dang short to live it stuck in a rut. Now go check it out.
Beyond the rut.
Where do we send the royalties?
That is done. It's yours.
The Lima Charlie Network is a group of thought leaders and podcasters with the goals of improving ourselves,
inspiring and educating others, and bringing valuable conversations to both military and civilian audiences.
Our vision is to empower others to reach new heights in leadership,
self-development, and communication by connecting our audience to crucial conversations.
Focused on sharing tools, ideas, and perspectives for impactful improvement.
A one-stop shop for aspiring and seasoned leaders alike to gain from the experiences and knowledge of others.
We aren't just a network of colleagues, we are family.
And we invite you to come and join us on this journey.
And we look forward to delivering invaluable information to you loud and clear.
Hey, this is Jeff Johnston, host of the Living Undeterred podcast and founder of the Living Undeterred Project. You are listening to the Shadows Podcast.
All right, so I want to welcome everybody to another episode of Shadows Podcast. I'm your host, Trip Bodenheimer, and I am super excited. Jack O'Halloran here today. He is an actor, former boxer. You probably notice him most from Non, the Kryptonian supervillain in Superman. So we're going to talk all of that. He has a very interesting story to tell. Sir, thank you very much for joining us on Shadows Podcast.
My pleasure.
So before we get started, I'm going to just throw a couple of rapid fire questions at you to get going. First thing, who would you cast as the next Superman?
I would, and this is what we want to do, actually. We're trying to put this project together. We want to bring Christopher back in hologram. They're never going to find another Christopher Reeve.
That is true.
And that's, you can thank Richard Donner for that. Donner got a performance out of that young man, and that was his first big movie. I mean, he'd never done anything like that before. And Richard Donner got a performance out of him. And what the greatness of the performance was the transition from Superman to Clark Kent, that he did it so well, you know, and he had a great look. And I remember when he came on the set the first time when they hired him, and he weighed like 172 pounds soaking wet. And the guy who played Darth Vader in Star Wars, he was a bodybuilder, and they said they brought him in to build Christopher up. And I told him, I said, you know, you don't want to bulk him. You don't want to get weights and bulk him up. You want to do like George Reeves, the guy who was Mr. America, who was cut so very perfectly. He weighed like 195 pounds, but the definition in his body was amazing. And that's what they did. And because Chris had an ego deal, he wouldn't wear anything under the suit. So if you built him properly with definition, it would show well under the Superman suit, and which it did, you know. And they pumped him up to about, he was up over 200 pounds, somewhere around 205, something like that. And he, but in a good way, you know. gave his mobility and flexibility and stuff. He wasn't all puffed out like an Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know.
Okay, David Prowse, I think, was Darth Vader.
David Prowse, yeah. Dave was a good guy, a nice fella, and he and I had a long conversation about exactly how to build him up and how to, teach him with Tai Chi and stuff, different ways of exercising that didn't put bulk muscles, but gave you a lot of strength and put a definition into you, and using light weights and stuff and do repetitions and put to build the muscular structure of his body and not just pump him like trying to bulk him out like a ball player or something, like a weightlifter. And It worked very well. And Christopher was just, Richard Donner, just like I said, brought a performance out of him. So I don't know of anybody. And this young kid, this one young fellow is a close look. He has a great look. And whether or not the right director got a hold of him with the right script, but they've gotten Superman, they took it way away from where it should be. They took it into a dark version. And what people fail to understand is that was the first American superhero. And to keep it like we did in 1 and 2, the all-American way. He locked people up. He didn't kill everybody. He wasn't running around killing, people all over the place. He was catching them legally, according to law and order, creating, instead of creating all the havoc, he was creating good for the society. And that's what Superman was about. And what they've done and taken it darker and darker and darker. Oh my God, some of these things I see in Superman and Batman, then they're killing everybody walking down the street. And that just isn't the premise of Superman. So we have a great storyline and a great deal that we're going to try to put across to bring him back. And with hologram, the technology is phenomenal. You would swear he was on the screen. You would never know he wasn't alive. So, and we'll bring this Villains back the same way. So if it works out, we have a great storyline. It would be really good because we'll wind up with the villains being turned around and they become a cohorts of Superman, and he's fighting all these other planets coming in now. Now he's got his own little army. You know what I mean?
That's pretty exciting.
Kind of cool.
Yeah, that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah,
pretty excited about that now.
It would be great, actually, to be honest with you. So
we'll really good information off of a leadoff question here. That was really good. That was really good stuff. Favorite Rocky film?
That was my life.
No.
We did a picture called Farewell My Lovely with Robert Mitchum. He had a small role, and he picked my brain every day about boxing, and I was the gangster fighter from Philadelphia because I was in the organized crime there, and I told him about the waterfront. He never been to Philadelphia like that, and he never knew anything about that. And the gym that the gym, when you see Rocky the movie, the gym where they're going upstairs, they walk up these crappy stairs. Well, that's the gym we had at Passyunkin War, but he made it in the movie like it was in North Philadelphia. Yet you see him running in South Philadelphia, through the streets of South Philly, and he supposedly trains in a gym up in North Philly, and
Mickey's gym
lives on a little street, and it's actually in South Philadelphia, but he's professing like it's up in North Philly. So. Anyway, God bless him, he did well with the movie and stuff like that, but I was signed to fight Ali. And so he took a combination of me, and then Chuck Wepner was the bleeder. So and Wepner was from North Jersey. But the waterfront of collecting and all that stuff, he got all that knowledge from myself. And so Rocky was, and God bless him, he made a good movie. It came out pretty well,
I'm personally a Rocky IV fan with Drago, the scene with Apollo Creed and all that. That's my go-to. I had actually met Carl Weathers at a Comic-Con not too long ago, and I went up to him.
Pretty good athlete.
Oh yeah,
he's a nice guy.
And he's still a beast. He still is a big guy. And I went up to him and I told him, I said, you dying in Rocky IV was like a dark hole in my childhood memory. Sitting there watching that. All right, how about
they simulated him to be like Ali, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were supposed to be so fast and all that stuff, but there was only one Muhammad Ali.
Oh, of course. Yeah, definitely. Fantasy fight: Chuck Norris or Bruce Lee?
Wow. Bruce Lee for sure.
Bruce Lee.
I mean,
Okay.
and I did a picture with Chuck, Hero and the Terror. Chuck Norris and I are pretty good friends, and he was an Oklahoma kid that studied martial arts, and he wasn't bad at it, but he was no Bruce Lee, trust me.
Okay. From what I understand, doing research, you grew up, is it Runnymede, New Jersey?
Well, I actually grew up in Philadelphia.
Philadelphia?
Grew up in Philly, and then they built the Walt Whitman Bridge in 1958, and everybody ran over to South Jersey because they got left the city, and New Jersey opened up. It was farmland, and they just we built a house in Belmar, New Jersey, and I went to school. I started high school at West Catholic in Philadelphia, and I finished at Triton Regional in Runnymede. That's where the Runnymede comes in at.
Okay.
Then when I got first married, I lived in Runnymede. So I started boxing. I was living in Runnymede, New Jersey, but I trained in Philly.
What was it that sparked your interest in boxing?
I was playing pro ball. I was going to play pro ball. And it was in an era when I left college, when it was in an era where you couldn't play professional football until your class graduated. And they should still have that, actually, because kids are too young going into pro football, leaving in their freshman year of college. But anyway, you had to wait. So we played in what they had. I was picked up by the Jets. And there was a team out of Philadelphia called Tinicum AC that was in the semi-pro. It was like a farm system for baseball. What was a farm system for football. And the Christie brothers, Dick Christie and his brother, and a lot of us played on this team. And we played a couple games a week to keep our levels up, So, and some guys got injured, some didn't. And it was kind of a crazy, crazy time. And when it came time for me to play, I wanted to go down and play with the Eagles because I had a lot of friends down there, and they had Jurgensen and McDonald, and they had a great team, actually. And it was bought by a kid, Jerry Wallman, who was a really super kid. Him and Snyder were partners, and they had bought the Eagles and the Flyers, and they built the Spectrum in Philly and stuff. And so I went down to, and they wanted me to come down there and play. And then they hired this guy, Joe Kuharich, as a coach. And I watched this guy trade a championship football team away within 3 months. Traded Jurgensen, McDonald to Washington for Norman Snead. So good hardly played a game. Traded 5 great linemen to Green Bay for Ringo, whose career was over. He traded Maxie Vaughn and another guy to L.A. for a running back that they never got. So they tore. This guy tore a good football team apart. And we came out of a meeting one day, Timmy Brown and I, and Timmy was a great running back. And we came out of a meeting one day, and we were walking by Kuharich, and he walked right by us. I said, "Whoa, man, you don't say hello to nobody?" I said, "Yeah, bro." Timmy said, "Listen, while you're at it, trade me." And I told him, "Stick this team up your butt." And Ali had just won the title at the time. So I said to some friends in Philadelphia, I think I can beat that guy. And next thing I know, I'm in the gymnasium, and I couldn't box amateur because I was always registered as a professional. In those days, you couldn't do that. You could today, but you couldn't do it then. So I went put into a gym for a few months and started boxing. I think it was September of that year of '66.
Yeah, so
around there.
You definitely had a imposing force at 6'5", pretty big guy.
Well, when I played ball, I weighed like 280, and I was 6'6", and I ran a 4.640, so I could move very quickly. So when I went in the gym to train for boxing, they took my weight all the way down to like 226. I was shaking. I had to put weight back on, and so I started. I think my first fight I weighed 230 or 231 or something like that, and then we ran off like 16 straight wins and. And I went to do a medical one day and for a fight or for my license in Pennsylvania, I had to once a year do this extreme medical. And they come up with this factor that I suffered from a disease called acromegalia, which is a tumor of the pituitary gland, which creates gigantism. Like, you have a lot of growth hormone in your body, and it creates depression and stuff like that. And
Andre the Giant had that, right?
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Andre the Giant, a couple people. Richard Kiel, he died from it. And so they told me they shouldn't. The guy said, how do you even get in the ring? How can you get your head up to go in and fight? And I was a tough kid in the street. It was just, I said, you know what, that's my day job, man. When you're running with organized crime, you had to have a day job. So I said, I think I'll just keep on doing what I'm doing. Thank you very much. And he said, why? This disease will kill you. So I went on and on and on until I went out to California to fight Norton. And I gave Norton a licking and a half, and they stole the decision, but I won the city, so I stayed there and ripped off a couple knockouts and fought for the California Heavyweight Championship and won that. Beat a kid named Henry Clark that nobody wanted to fight. But the doctor that was did the physicals and all, Bill Lundeen, and I became very good friends. And he said to me one day, he said, Jack, you either go to Scripps and get a workup or I'm pulling your license because this disease is going to kill you. This is not a good idea, kid. You got to do something about this. And I said, okay. So I went to Scripps, and sure enough, your body normally pumps out like 10% growth hormone. Mine was pumping out 150. And Scripps wanted to do an operation where they went up through your nose, and the chances of losing the gland were like 85%. So you'd wind up with hormones the rest of your life pumping them down your throat. So I said, that's not a good idea. So I reached out to some doctors on the East Coast, and there was a guy up in Mass General, Raymond Schoberg, who had a whole pioneering thing on a machine called the cyclotron proton machine, which was a beam, and they had one at Harvard University. And it was like a laser beam, but it didn't burn. It was a proton beam. And what it did, it would hit the tumor and cause an inner explosion of the tumor. So I listened to the guy and I liked what he said. So I went in the hospital and they drilled 4 holes in my head and put this thing on my head and bolted me to a machine so you couldn't move and hit me with this beam. And I was very lucky. I was one of the 1,000 the first time out that it actually blew the tumor right out. Just,
wow.
And then I was supposed to stay in the hospital for another week and a half till they, got everything, because it was all the readings and everything. They were doing research, and they wanted to collect as much data as they could. And so I had these 4 holes in my head, and 4 days later, I checked out of the Mass General Hospital and went down to Baltimore, Maryland, and fought a guy. The look on your face. Well, the guy, my doctor, had the same look. He said, "Are you crazy? You're going to kill yourself." He said, "Man, are you nuts or what?" And I said, "Well, I made an obligation to do this." So I left Boston and drove to Philadelphia and went to the gym and trained one day, and then drove down to Baltimore and fought Larry Middleton, who was like ranked number 2 in the world.
How did that go with like pre-fight, like state commission and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I got past all that. I was pretty clever. So they didn't know about the operation. And I just, you can pass your eye test and everything. So it's just blood test and eye test and lung capacity and stuff. And, can you fight? Yeah. Can you feel your pulse? Is it running? Yeah, no problem. So, but, I just, you're fighting a 10-round fight, and you got to have some kind of conditioning. And usually I used to skip rope for an hour a day and stuff and run, and I ran every day all the time. But being in the hospital and everything threw my whole thing off, so I wasn't in the greatest shape at all. And, I ran out of gas around the 9th round. They stopped the fight, and and a guy that I would have beat easy if I had 2 weeks of training or something. I was just do my normal deal. But anyway, it opened my eyes to it's time to give it up. And, they came to me to do a picture called "Farewell, My Lovely," and was a good deal. Robert Mitchum was, I blame it all on him. I took a screen test and Mitchum said, it's either him or I don't do the movie. And I had turned down a few movies prior to that. You know, they came in 1966. Steve McQueen came to Boston to do the Thomas Crown Affair. And we took care of him. I was up in Boston training. And we looked after him when he was in the city. And he and I became really good friends. And he said, man, you got to come down on the set and I'll put you in the movie. We'll get your SAG card. You come out to Hollywood, we'll have a ball. He said, this would be a brand new career for you. And I said, I was undefeated as a heavyweight. And I said, you know, man, I'm got a pretty good run going here in boxing. And I said, I don't think it's time for me to give it up yet. And he said, well, you know, you come to Hollywood, blah, blah, blah. So a couple of years later, I knocked out a kid, Manuel Ramos, who was ranked number 2 in the world. He was the champ of Mexico. And they came to me to do a picture called The Great White Hope, which was the biggest movie in Hollywood at the time with James Earl Jones. And the deal was done by a guy, Raymond Patriarca from Rhode Island, who was a serious don up in Rhode Island. And he wanted me off the streets because they were trying to keep me from going to jail. So he said, you know, made a deal with Eddie Foy at Fox. All I had to do was go in and sign the agreement, and the picture was mine. I could have went to Spain for 6 months. And I said to the producer, I said, you know, I just knocked out the number 2 heavyweight in the world. I'm looking to fight Muhammad Ali, and you want me to go to Spain for 6 months, do a movie? And I said, you know, I don't think this is ready for me yet. And the guy said, well, I thought you were just supposed to sign the contract. And Eddie Foy was scared to death. What am I going to tell Raymond Patriarca? I'm in trouble. I said, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. So I, you know, went on about my business, and next I went and fought Foreman in the Garden, and a couple more fights after that. I came out to San Diego and fought Norton and a bunch of other people, and then when this acromegaly thing happened and I got it done in Boston, it was time to hang him up. So I got a phone call from, I had an agent in San Diego. I was doing commercials when I was California heavyweight champion for the Clippers and for a couple other products down there. She called me up. She said, they want you to do a movie very badly. I said, what movie? She said, Farewell, My Lovely with Robert Mitchum. And she said, and I think you should really consider it. And I looked around where I was and I said, you know, maybe it's time for me to do this. And so I went out and did the screen test with Harry Dean Stanton. And Mitchum saw the screen test and he said, it's either him or I don't do the movie. And I said, so I blame it all on Robert Mitchum. He was like a father to me. He was really great. And he walked me right down the street, you know, put me in. And I don't know if you've ever seen Farewell, My Lovely, but if you haven't, you should. It's a good film, and it worked well. And just vaulted me into the film industry.
Okay.
And Steve McQueen called me up. He said, "See, I told you. What I tell you? What I tell you?" He said, "It's all, you know." So here I be.
So you, like you said, you went undefeated your first 16 fights from September of 66 to September of 68. You mentioned some of those notable wins you had. You did fight George Foreman. Ken Norton, who hit harder, Foreman or Norton? Foreman.
Yeah, the Foreman fight, I was actually beating him the first couple rounds, and I walked in. It's on. You can watch it on YouTube. Actually, I have some more people watching that fight. It drives me crazy. I walked into a punch, and I only trained a week for the fight, which was stupid. But I walked into a punch, and I got up, and it really made me mad because I got up off the floor, and they stopped. They were looking for a reason to stop it, and they stopped it right away. As soon as I fell, they stopped the fight, and I got really pissed off. And George would never fight me again because it was good. It was a good fight, but you know, it was what it was.
Well, you had mentioned too, you were in contention to face Muhammad Ali. If that fight would have taken place, how do you think you would have matched up with Ali?
I'll tell you a funny story. You know, I fought a guy in Detroit. They had taken my license in California because they thought I was involved in organized crime. I don't know where they got that idea, but they took my license away for a short period of time. And they called me on the phone. And they said, you want to fight Alvin Blue Lewis in Detroit? And I said, can I get a license? It's absolutely. We'll give you a license. No problem. And you want to take the fight? because he was supposed to fight Buster Mathis, and Mathis couldn't get a license in Detroit for some reason. And I said, yeah, man. I said, send me a ticket. So I went out to Detroit, and this guy was like ranked 2 in the world. He had just fought Ali 13 rounds in Ireland, and then he came home and he beat Terrell and he beat another guy, and they were looking to make another Ali fight. But he had to get by a good fighter, and I was nominated. So, but I beat this guy to death. I beat him really bad, 10 out of 10. And I went up to Ali's camp afterwards. I drove up to Deer Park, Deer Lake, and he and I were good friends. And I went in. We all the press was there because he was training for a fight. And we went in. He said, "Come here, man. Let's go in." We went into a locker room and we shut the door, and we were banging on the door and kicking it. And they thought that we were in there fighting, and we were screaming at each other, "You punk! I'll kick your ass!" And he said, "Watch this. It'll be good, Jack." And we went out, and all these guys' eyes were bigger than a knife, waiting. Press guys thinking something really terrific was going on. And we sat down to eat dinner, and he said to me, "Jack," he said, "if I give you a title fight, will you really try and beat me?" I said, "I'll tell you what, champ. For the first time in my boxing career, I will go away to a camp and I will train like you guys do. I'll take a couple months and really go get into it. And when I come in the ring, you better bring a gun with you, because that's about the only way you're going to beat me." He said, "2 steaks, please." So we used to have a lot of laughs. I liked Muhammad Ali. He was a tremendous athlete, and it would have been a great fight. Let me tell you that. It would have been one hell of a fight.
Yeah, I think oftentimes people look at him for the charisma, but he was an amazing athlete.
And he would have been great in any sport.
Yeah.
I don't care what sport he tried. He was just and the whole Rabiosa thing was he learned from Gorgeous George. Gorgeous George, the wrestler, told him, he said, "Listen, man," he said, "you know what? You want to stir people up. You want to get 50% of the crowd wanting to see you get your butt kicked, and 50% of the crowd wanting to see you win, but it gives you 100% of the crowd, doesn't it?" And that's what he did. People went there to see him get beat because of his mouth, and other people loved him, so they wanted to see him win. So he changed the whole complexion of boxing. I mean, he put money into fighting. He was, when I started boxing back in '66, I think I got $10 a round. So you're fighting a 4-round fight, you got $40, and then you got to pay your corner and everybody else, and you walk away with what, chump change. But I had a group that paid me every week to train and all. So I was okay there, but I mean, you never really made any serious money, When I fought Blue Lewis in Detroit, I think they paid me like $4,000 or something for the fight. And this guy's ranked number 2 in the world. Today, that fight would be worth $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? So I had a friend of mine, Ronnie Harris, who was a lightweight Olympic champion and a pretty good lightweight fighter. But he was a gangster. And he ran Jefferson Boulevard in Detroit. And he was a funny little guy. He was great. So I told him, I said, "Listen, man, I want you to bet every round of this fight." He said, "Jack, you're fighting in Detroit. You're fighting the number 2 ranked heavyweight in the world. This guy's no chump, and this is his hometown. And you want me to bet every?" I said, "You bet every round of this fight. I'm going to beat this guy every round." He said, "Okay." So we made 92 grand betting around the ring. Only got paid $4 for the fight.
Wow.
But I beat this kid every round. I mean, he made me angry, and I just really gave him a licking and a half. And but no one would fight me again. When you beat guys like that, then nobody ever wants to fight you. They did it to me. They called me on the phone. I was in New Jersey living, and they called me on the phone. They said, "You want to fight a kid named Terry Daniels in Houston, Texas?" And he was ranked like 5th or 6th in the world. He was from Ohio, but he was boxing out of Texas. And I said, "Yeah." They were looking for a white guy to fight Frazier. And I said, "Sure, no problem." So I was living in Jersey, and at the time I was house ridden because we had some organized crime problems. We had some indictments against us, so I couldn't walk around the streets. So I was training. And I got myself in pretty good shape. And they called me up, so I flew down to Houston, and the promoter, Lou Viscusi, I never forget when I got up, they picked me up in the plane. He said, "My God, Jack, you're in shape." I said, "Well, aren't you supposed to be in shape when you come to a fight, son?" He said, "But you really are in shape." I said, "Well, let's play the game." So I destroyed this kid, Daniels. I mean, they should have stopped in the first round. They waited till the third. And third round, I hit him a shot. He was out for half an hour. He was a nice kid, too, but that's sad. So I'm flying back to Philly on the plane with Yank Durham. And Yank Durham's Frazier's manager. And he said to me, "Jack, how would you like to fight Frazier in Houston Astrodome?" He said, "If you beat one more good fighter, you can have the Frazier fight." I said, "I'll tell you what, you name the place and you pick the fighter, just send me a ticket." He said, "Are you kidding me?" I said, "No, you pick the fighter and the time, just send me a ticket." So they called me up a week later and they said, "You're going to fight Cleveland Williams." Cleveland was a ranked fighter and a pretty good fighter. And his hometown was Houston. So I fly down and I stayed in shape. I kept running every day. I was in pretty good shape. And I went down and I beat Williams easy, 10 out of 10. In fact, I really like Cleveland. And, he probably hit me harder than anybody in my career. In the third round of that fight, and thank God I was in shape, boy. He caught me a left hook, boy. And I'll tell you what, I felt it in my toes. My toes felt pain. And I fell into the corner. And he came charging at me, and I thumbed him, and I cuffed him, and I spun him around. And I said, "You know what, son? You're never touching me the rest of this night." And I gave him a boxing lesson. And then the last couple rounds, because Cleveland, he was at the end of his career, and he, to knock him out would have hurt his earning capacity. So, and he lived in Tampa, Florida, so I threw a combination at him in the later rounds, and I'd see him starting to buckle the fall, and I grabbed him under the arms and pulled him up and said, "Don't be falling down on me, son. We've been dancing all night. Now don't be bunking out of it." And I carried him to the 10th round and won an easy decision over him. And Terry Daniels got the Frazier fight, and Cleveland Williams got to fight George Saval on the same card. And no one would fight me again. It was back out to hitting the road, Joe.
I like how you were talking about knocking out people and you're like, "Nice kid, knocked him out."
Terry was a nice kid. He was,
So
but he was a ballsy kid, and they should have stopped it in the first round, but he had a reputation of coming back. Some guys are just take abuse and they keep coming. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And he had that reputation. So I hit him a left hook in the I think it was the third round, yeah, and I picked him up from one corner and laid him down in the other one. I mean, he was out. Forget about it. And he was, yeah.
What do you think about all the research with like CTE and brain trauma and everything that's come along with boxing? Do you feel like any of that has affected you at this point?
People say to me, because I had a lot of fights and I actually had 25 more fights that aren't even on my record. I had 25 knockouts from different smoker fights. We used to go, there was a guy up in Massachusetts who ran fights every week in some little town in New England. And we all used to go around to the fights and he'd say, you got your gear with you? I said, "Well, yeah, why?" He said, "Oh, we're short of fight." He said, and I said, "What?" I said, "My management isn't going to like this." He said, "No, man." He said, "We'll change your name. Don't worry about it. Fight under another name." And I said, "What about the commission? We got our pocket. Don't worry about it." So I knocked out like 25 different guys. It was like a gym workout. You know what I mean? But a couple $100, boom, boom, boom. It's nice to make you laugh. And it's just, what would you ask me a question? I forgot. Now I got off the truck.
I was asking about CTE.
Oh, yeah. So, I just don't, it never affected me. But I never took some of the beatings that some of these guys have taken, like Frazier. Frazier was a marshmallow at the end of his career. And that's because of the beatings he took from Ali. Ali gave him terrible beatings. I mean, really bad, boy. And Joe, I felt bad for Joe because he used to fall over, and And when I fought him, if I would have fought him in Houston, I would have done the same thing that Foreman did. And Archie Moore told George Foreman when he fought Joe Frazier, he said, "You listen to me. You walk out in that ring and hit him right on top of the head. Just throw an overhand right and hit him right flat on top of his head." Because they knew Joe couldn't take a punch anymore. And his feet went, if you ever see the Foreman fight, George hit him and his feet went out from under him, sideways, and and I felt bad for him because he was performing, singing, and he was falling off stages and stuff. And I liked Joe. Joe and I were friends. We were, Philadelphia, and there was two guys in Philly that he would never fight. He wouldn't fight me and he wouldn't fight, what the name just popped right out of my mind. Oh man, good heavyweight too. Oh, Jack. I'll think about it. A good heavyweight, and he wouldn't fight him either. So, and they trained in the same gym together. So we went. We were supposed to fight a couple times, and it just never happened. And that's boxing. So, and I like Joe. Joe was a good kid.
Well, you mentioned earlier the Spectrum in Philadelphia and the Astrodome. What was your favorite arena to box in? Or the most special one to you?
Oh, the Garden was, you gotta give
Mecca.
The Garden sparks up. It was fighting in the Garden was a kick, man. I never boxed in the Spectrum. I boxed in the arena in Philly, and it was an old landmark, where a lot of great fights, it's where Marciano fought Walcott, and there were a lot of great fights in that place. But I would say probably the Garden.
I was expecting that one. I was expecting Madison Square Garden. I thought that would be your answer. I've never been there. I think that'd be the coolest thing, just to get to walk in there and experience it. So much history. So you were inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame and the California Boxing Hall of Fame in 2009. What did that mean to you?
Well, it was good. I was inducted in the California Hall of Fame, and Pennsylvania Hall of Fame, Massachusetts Hall of Fame, New Jersey Hall of Fame, and it's nice to be thought of that way. It's nice to get the recognition that you really had an ability, and that boxing people knew that, and it's. I was my own worst enemy. There was a lot of fights that I lost decisions on because I traveled to different people's backyards because I was doing other business there. I had somebody taking care of some business in Ohio or something, that there was a fight, and I'd say, "Get me a fight, a reason to be there," so that no one could say, "Well, I was there for this other business," just that I had a reason to be in a different place. And you're fighting guys in their backyards, and you're getting bad decisions, It's like when I went to London to fight Bugner. Joe Bugner was coming. We were, and I was we fought in Albert Hall, which is another great.
Well, Albert Hall.
Albert Hall was great, and we fought in Albert Hall, and we were supposed to fight a 10-round fight, and in the 7th round, Bugner started to go, and I was hitting him pretty good, and he was wobbly. And the 8th round, I had him. I had just ready to knock him out, and they rang the bell. They cut the round short, and then they stopped the fight, and they said, "Oh no, this is only an 8-round fight." And he won the fight. They gave him the fight by 1/4 of a point. No one ever heard of that in English boxing before. It was the first. And then, the next day they blasted on the newspapers, "Our American gets robbed by 1/4 of a point decision," and it was, and the guy that ref the fight, Harry Gibbs, was a famous referee. And the next time I fought over in England, I fought in the Grosvenor House, which is another classy joint. And I beat Carl Gizzi, who was the champ of Wales, and a pretty good fighter, pretty good fighter. And I beat Carl Gizzi, and the same referee, Harry Gibbs. And Harry Gibbs come up to me after the fight. He said, "See, Jack, we don't steal all your decisions." I wanted to give him a smack, It was, but that's boxing,
So
yeah, Albert Hall was kind of a neat place to fight.
I bet. I actually rode by Albert Hall when I was in London. That was one of the places that we saw like on our little sightseeing tour. It's beautiful.
Yeah, Albert Hall was pretty cool.
So you talked about the transition. You go into acting. The first role you had, you mentioned you were an ex-convict, Moose Malloy and Farewell My Lovely, and you gave us a little bit of insight into that one. And then my question before we get like deeper into it, what is like that one role that you look back at it and you're like, I wish I would have taken that. I wish I would have taken that one role.
Wow, I turned down a lot of pictures.
I noticed one was Jaws and The Spy Who Loved Me.
It came to me to do Jaws. I did King Kong, and then I did a movie. I was signed to do a movie, March or Die, in Spain with Gene Hackman and Catherine Deneuve, and a hell of a cast. I mean, Max von Sydow and Richard. I mean, had really good cast in it, and I liked the idea of the script that was it. And Cubby Broccoli and his son, they sent me a script, and I read it, and they flew into LA to try to talk me into doing this picture, and I was sitting around the corner with Mitchum celebrating his birthday, and these guys are sitting in my agent's office, and I said, Bob, I got to go around the corner and see these guys out of respect. He said, did you read the script? I said, yeah. He said, do you like it? I said, no. He said, then we'll tell them to go to hell. They flew all the way from London. He said, so what? Said, they got money. So Robert was a great guy. He said, if you don't like the movie, don't do it. So I went around and I met them, and they said, please, do we really want you to do this picture? And I said, well, I just signed to do a picture called March or Die, and I have an obligation there, but I probably could have got out of it, And I'm glad I didn't, because it was the same crew when I did March or Die that did Superman. And when I was doing March or Die, Donner wanted Hackman and I to fly to England to sit down and talk about doing Superman, So I think it worked out much better. It's the way the chips fell, you know what I mean? But the picture that I wish I would have done was with Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder. They wanted me to do Silver Streak.
Yep.
And I was doing King Kong. And we had a break of 6 weeks because they had to go to New York to shoot the ending of the picture. And we weren't in that. We were already supposedly fell off the log. Although the log was the last scene we ever shot. And so I had 6 weeks to sit at the beach, and Paramount begged me, man, Jesus. And they said, God, we'll give you walk and tall. We'll let you do this, let you do that. And I wanted to do this picture in Ireland, and I should have thought better about, I should have went up, and I wish I would have done the picture, because Gene Wilder's a great guy and Richard's a good kid. And I had a lot of fun, and I should have done that picture. That's the one picture I really wish I had done, to tell you the truth.
Okay. Yeah, and your film resume is incredible. You talked about King Kong. You had Jeff Bridges, Jessica Lange, and that. What memories do you have about King Kong?
We had a great crew, a great cast, a great script. We could have used a better director, but we had a lot of fun doing it. It was a long picture. I mean, God, we worked like 9 months. It was a trip, so it was like a great job. You know what I mean? But yeah, it was. I mean, Jessie was. You knew Jessica was a star the first day she walked on the set. Jessica had that about her, just an aura about her, and she's such a wonderful lady. God, we're dear friends. I mean, I love Jessica to death. She's just, and Jeffrey's a hell of an actor, and Charlie Grodin, and Charlie Grodin's a fun guy to work with, and even the cast of character actors, Dennis Fipple and all, everybody, John Randolph was in it, and we had Julius Harris, and it was good. We had a good time. We had a good time doing it.
Yeah, it's like a who's who cast wise, if you look it up.
King Kong had a great cast, and it was and the picture came out really well, but it could have come out better. I mean, the director was a bit of a buffoon, but he drank too much. That was the problem. And to show you just an example, we're in Kauai shooting, and we were supposed to go to Kauai for like a week. We were there for almost a month and a half because of this guy's inadequacies and stuff. And we're shooting the fog scene. You see King Kong?
Yes.
See the picture? Okay. The fog scene where we come through the fog to where we see the island, and we're trying to shoot the fog scene. We're in Kauai, and it's on a Sunday. Now, here we are, actors on location and working on a Sunday. And you're talking about quadruple time, because you're on location working a Sunday. And we worked 15 hours that day. We had 7 straight meal penalties, which means that you went past your meal time because you were supposed to do this shot or something. Never turned the camera. How much money that cost that day for
Can imagine.
So, and the guys, the people of Hawaii told John Gillerman, they said, "You're never going to get this shot today because of the wind. We're never going to be able to lay this fog down adequately enough to get the shot that you want." And we wound up filming that shot in Zuma Beach, Malibu. That's where we wound up laying the fog and shooting the fog scene. We had already shot coming through and landing on the island and all that stuff. That was all Kauai. But the fog scene itself, we actually shot in Zuma Beach. He never got the shot in Hawaii.
All that time.
he wouldn't listen to people. Oh, I can get that shot. Never got it, man. It was a trip. I just made me laugh. I said, wow.
So yeah, you finished King Kong. You have March or Die. You talked about how that kind of led to Superman. What memories do you have of working with Christopher Reeve?
Christopher was a young guy. It was his first big movie. And the saddest part about Christopher was that when they brought Lester on, Christopher Reeve should have stood up and said, "No Donner, no me." And they would have had to let Donner finish Superman. And if Donner would have finished 2, he'd have done 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, the Donner cut.
Donner cut's much better. I mean, we had already shot 85% of the movie. It was already in the can, and Lester, to put his name on as a director, had to shoot better than 50% of the movie. So we went back and reshot some stuff, But difference between Donner and Lester is night and day. I mean, Richard Donner is a great director, and he lived, ate, and slept Superman. But they didn't want to pay him. And how do you cut Marlon Brando out of a picture?
Yeah.
Marlon Brando's in the Donner cut because all the footage was shot already. I mean, they already shot the footage. They didn't want to pay him the points. Brando only worked 11 days on the film.
Is that what it came down to, was contract?
Sorry?
Is that what it came down to, contract dispute?
Yeah. They didn't want to pay the points. They didn't want to pay. And I mean, how do you cut Marlon Brando out of a movie? That's ridiculous. And then get rid of the director as well. It's just because you're trying to save money. I mean, that's the Salkinds. And they blew a brilliant franchise because Superman 3 was nothing. And 4 was even worse.
Well, it impacted Margaret Kidder and Gene Hackman too, right?
Yeah, well, Gene Hackman never came back for 2.
Yeah,
he never came back. And Margot Kidder, they fired her. After 2, they fired her. And she was having an affair with Richard Pryor. And Richard Pryor said, either you put her in the movie or I don't do it. See, now Christopher had that power. The Salkinds were so angry at Margot, they fired her. And Pryor said, "You not only are you putting her in the movie, but you're giving her $1 million." And she did a small role in Superman 3 because of Pryor, But the Salkinds were livid, man. But if Christopher would have stood up and said, "No Donner, no me," they would have been a whole different franchise.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about what could have happened with that. But yeah, the Donner cut versus the Lester cut, I heard, is like just complete night and day between the two.
Have you ever seen the Donner cut?
I have not.
Oh, you ought to see it. No. Do yourself a favor.
Yeah.
Do yourself a favor. Oh, really, seriously.
Yeah.
Do yourself a favor.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check that out. I've never seen the Donner. I always grew up just watching, getting the VHS.
Well, we shot for instance, when we lost our powers in the fortress, when Christopher Reeve pulled the switch over they thought that they were taking his power away, but we lost our power, and we fall into this abyss. You see us fall into this, and that's the last you see of the villains, right? But we shot footage of us getting out of the abyss and being put into police cars and being locked up, which would have led into the other pictures. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so just so sad. Richard Donner is just a great, great director. And he lived, eats, and slept Superman. In fact, he still does the comic books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he and Mankiewicz were a great team. I mean, they were so into the picture, and they did a great job. I mean, Superman 1 and Superman, look at this. What are we, 45 years later, and people still walk in the theater. It's still one of the best films made.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy to think what could have been Superman 3, Superman 4, Superman 5 if Donner would have stayed on.
They were labeled to make 10 of them.
Yeah. Wow.
And then Superman 4 was done by Cannon. It wasn't even done by Warner Brothers. They gave a license to Cannon Films. Cannon paid the Salkinds a lot of money for a license to do the film. And they just and Christopher wrote the script for it. And it was, oh God. In fact, I couldn't even watch it. I just
What about your character, Nan, that you had a mute? Whose idea was that? How did you playing that role?
When I got the script, Nan was a brilliant scientist that they lobotomized. Yeah. And when I went up to see Donner, he said, how do you feel about the fact that this guy is a mute? I said, let me tell you something. I embrace that. I want to do that. He said, really? I said, yeah. I said, because Jackie Gleason was a friend of mine, and he did a picture called Gigo, where he was a deaf, dumb mute, and he won an Oscar for it.
Yeah.
And I said, if I ever get an opportunity to get a picture where you express yourself, through facial expressions and everything, I want to do that. And what better picture? Because here you got Terrence Stamp as a vicious general, and Sarah's a man-eater. Somebody had to relate to the kids. So I took this big, brutish guy, and I played him like a child. Learning how to work my eyes and stuff, and getting all jubilation when I had a victory over something. And it worked very well, it really, but I remember the first time I ever did a Comic-Con, and people came up to me and they said, my God, you can actually talk? I thought it was a kind of a kick, man. But it was, and kids, people that saw the picture as a child come up to me and they say, God, your character frightened to death at me, but I loved your character. So evidently what I did worked out pretty good.
Yeah. 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 It definitely worked out for you.
So it was pretty cool, and then one picture I did that it was sad. They didn't have the wherewithal to promote it properly, because it was a really good little film. Was Baltimore Bullet with Coburn and Omar Sharif, and it was Bruce Boxleitner's first movie. And we actually shot the 9-ball tournament at MGM that year. We had every pool house in the country came to work on the film. It was kind of cool. It was a good little film. Boy. It was just sad that they didn't promote it properly. But it works pretty good.
You had Baltimore Bullet, and you had Superman 2, and then you had Dragnet. What was it like working with?
Dragnet was a kick, man.
I bet that had to be entertaining. Dan Aykroyd and Tom Hanks on set.
You could watch Dragnet 50 times, and you still won't get all the one-liners that Danny Aykroyd throws out. Danny Aykroyd was just so brilliant, and he's such a great comedian. And it was a breakout picture for Tom. You know, Tom's career was just bubbling out, and he's such a good guy, man. You know, it was a lot of fun. And Christopher Plummer, another great cast. It was another very, very good cast, you know, and it worked out really, really, really well. We had a lot of fun doing that picture. I enjoyed it a lot.
You got any good stories about them on set, Dan Aykroyd or Tom Hanks?
Yeah, man. I did all my own stunts, and we were doing that thing down at the beach where I was driving that limousine around. and it just, you know, Danny was a fun. I mean, when I ran over his foot, supposedly, you know, his reaction was so right on the money. I mean, all the timing that went into that thing was so cool. We had a real good time doing it. It was a great film, man. We had a ball doing that picture. It was good.
And then after Dragnet, you went on to, you kind of alluded to this one earlier, Hero and the Terror, where you were a serial killer. And
well, again, I played a guy that didn't talk, you know, and it gave me another opportunity to play another version of a villain, you know, and it worked out pretty good. You know, I remember when I was doing my wife from England was on the set, and she was sitting on the set when I was doing a shot where I come down a ramp in the garage, and I'm sitting there bullshitting with her, and I got I got to go to work, and I walk up the ramp and I turn around and I come down as this character, and after the shot's over, she said, "My God, how the hell do you do?" She said, "I'm be afraid to sleep with you." He said, "What?" She said, "My God, you turned around and turned into another person." You know, I said, "Well, that's what I get paid to do, you know."
Yeah, no, you're playing your role effectively.
That's what this is all about. Shit. But we had a lot of fun doing that too. Chuck's a good kid. Norris is a good kid.
I think some characters, it goes underrated, you know, like the fact you played several of them where it was just you didn't talk. And it's almost, if you would have, it would have almost like killed that character. Like in Star Wars, Darth Maul talks, and it ruins it for me from there on out.
Yeah. No, you just the characters, you know, if you're going to play a character, do it, play it, you know, do it. You know, it's Mitchum taught me something the very first beginning of my acting career. You know, he said to me, I remember the very first day he arranged for us to go to work together. They picked him up and then they picked me up and we drove down to the set together. And he had me laughing the whole way down. I mean, he just supposedly putting me at ease, you know. And we get down on the set and he said, "Okay, get your monkey suit on and I'll meet you over there." And we're doing the very first shot ever in my career. And he said to me, "Read that script, kid." I said, "Read it." "Man, I know your role, Charlotte Rampling's role, John Ireland's, back to back, everything." He said, "Good, throw it in the trash can." I said, "What?" He said, "Throw it in the trash can. Don't let me catch you doing what actors do out here, acting. Just be yourself. Put yourself in that role and walk down the street like it's you, man. Own that person. Be you." And when I did Farewell My Lovely, he knew a lot about me. And he said, "You're a gangster in life, kid. This is your chance to play a gangster." He said, "Just be yourself." And when I did Farewell My Lovely, I had friends of mine from the East Coast that watched the film, and they called me up. They said, "They paid you to do that movie?" We just saw you walking down the street, you know. So I did that with everything I did after that, you know, and it was a great lesson that Mitchum taught me.
Be yourself, not the script.
Yeah, just be yourself. Just to take yourself and put yourself in that character and make him come alive.
Yeah.
You know, and Hero and the Terror, I did that with that character. You know, people come up to, in fact, when they did, you know, they do these pre-screenings where people go and they mark the cards as, "Why did you come to see this movie?" and all.
Mm-hmm.
And they did a pre-screening of Hero and the Terror, and And the guy told me, he said, Jack, you ain't gonna believe this, but 86% of the people marked the reason they went to see that movie is because you were in it.
And Chuck Norris was in it with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you were in it. And which was a nice compliment, you know. But
yeah.
And I pulled the character off again. Once again, I pulled the character off pretty good. Worked out pretty well.
What was it like working with Chuck Norris?
Chuck's a nice kid. He and I talked about Bruce. You know, we talked about martial arts and all. And Chuck's a nice fellow. I like Chuck. He's a good kid.
Well, you were mentioning Bruce Lee, and I know we're kind of skipping around, but what were your memories of hanging out with him, talking with him? I know we talked a little bit before we started hitting the record button, but
Bruce was he really believed in what he did. You know, he changed martial arts completely, and he was a firm believer of it. And it's sad what they did to him, because he was supposed to do the David Carradine deal. They didn't want to. They couldn't have an Oriental star for some reason at that time, you know. And to David Carradine did that show. That was supposed to be Bruce Lee doing that. And he thought he was doing it. And then he went back to Hong Kong and he did a whole string of crazy movies and stuff because they made a lot of money, you know. And he made a lot of money. And then he came back over again and did the Green Hornet, you know, and the only way they did that was him wearing a mask. You know, there's always trying to hide the Asian factor. But he was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, it's just sad because he was a pretty good actor. Bruce was a pretty good actor, boy. You know, because he was very confident in him, you know, and he didn't need a stunt guy, that's for sure. You know, Bruce could stand up and do what he said he could do, and he was pretty good at it.
Yeah, he definitely looked the part. A lot of time for Bruce. Huh? So he definitely looked the part.
Oh yeah, no, and he was, you know, for a guy his size, you wouldn't want to meet him in a dark alley. Trust me.
Yeah.
You know, he could play.
Your career, I mean, like I said, you've got afterwards Mob Boss. You had Flintstones. You were in that. You had a role as you had the voice of a shuttle commander in Superman. How was it to come back and do that in 2011?
It was kind of funny. You know, I did that as a favor for somebody. You know, they said, "Oh man, you got to help us out?" Because they wanted your name attached to it. You know, but I just so. And then I wrote this book that we're getting ready to make into a mini series, then a series, because we've got 3 more books coming out. And then we have another book we want to incorporate with it, the life of Charlie Luciano, who was partners with my father. And my father was probably one of the most infamous Italians that ever came into the country in organized crime. And if you see The Godfather, when they go to Brando about the drug business, and Brando says that, we touch it, our children will touch it, it'll be the downfall. My father said that. So in 1957, Vito Genovese wanted the drug business so bad that they assassinated him. He talked everybody into assassinating Albert. And after they did that, they realized the mistake they made, because Albert was like the glue that held everything together. People were scared shitless of him because he ran Murder Inc. And he was a no bullshit person. You know, he believed in La Familia, and he believed in what he did. And, they never went after any innocent people or anything of that nature. It was all about what inner family's business. And he was against the drug business, which he was right. He should never have gotten into it. And he stopped a lot of people who were rats and stuff like that, you know. And it was a whole different world when he was alive. When he and Charlie Luciano were partners, and they had Frank, and there was a lot of respect amongst people, you know, Meyer Lansky, and they looked after me when my father was killed. You know, Meyer looked after me big time, and Raymond Patriarca and some other people, and you know. It's sad, the complexity. So what we did, I said, I want to write this book and tell a true story about how we were thrown under the bus, because in the beginning, you go back to 1920 when everything started, and you had industry, government, organized crime, and the unions were all partners. They all watched out each other's back, you know, and the money that they made, the illicit monies that were made, they put back into the growth of a country. They created a lot of jobs because their main source of income was gambling, extortion, and loan sharking. And so if you didn't have any money, how could you pay them? So you had to be working, you know. And that's where the Rocky story about the waterfront and everything, because my father controlled all the waterfronts. So I knew all the jobs that were, and Hoffa, I was good friend. Hoffa and I were good friends. I liked Jimmy Hoffa, you know. And there were a lot of stories that I told Stallone that gave him the knowledge to write the stuff that he wrote, you know. And it was a different world. I mean, when I was a kid growing up in Philadelphia, in Southwest Philadelphia, we never locked our front doors. People wouldn't think of committing certain crimes that people do on a daily basis today. There were no drive-by shootings. You could leave a baby pram outside and no one would touch it, you know, because people ran their neighborhoods very well. They looked after the people in their neighborhoods. You know, if you were in a German neighborhood or an Irish neighborhood or an Italian neighborhood, there were people who ran that neighborhood who were hoodlums, but they ran their neighborhoods well. They took care of each other. They watched people's backs. You know what I'm saying? And you know, where I was born and grew up, you wouldn't even think of walking down the street there now without a piece on you or something, because it's that bad. You know, and that's sad. The changes that you see happen in the world and the changes you see happen in the streets. And I watched a lot of changes happen, you know, and it's just very, very sad. I mean, when I was a kid, kids played in the street from sun up to sundown. You never went home until dinner time, and then you better be at the table. How many families actually sit down and eat dinner together today?
It's true.
You know? You better be at the dinner table at 6 o'clock or whatever deemed time that they eat dinner. You better be sitting there. And you looked each other in the eyes. So people knew whether anybody was in any drug business or any of that bullshit. Because your family looked at you. They knew they could hear you. If you were, you know, if you were doing something stupid, they would see it or know it. So it was a whole different deal, boy, raising up and stuff like that. And even though raising up in the streets where your toughness of going on through certain things and where there are racial outlays, yeah, there were racial outlays, but there were racial outlays between the Jewish neighborhoods and the Irish neighborhoods and the Italian neighborhood. But there was respect amongst people as well. You know, if you were a tough guy in the streets and you could handle yourself, certain people respected you from any ethnic group that you would be around. You understand? So it averted a lot of trouble. If you were tough and you could really stand up and handle yourself, a lot of fights were ceased because of that. No one wanted to play with you. You know what I mean? And you stopped a lot of stuff from happening, bullying and stuff of that nature.
You released Family Legacy, a book that outlines.
The book is out. We're getting ready to release another one, and we're getting ready to we were going to do a film, but there's just too much material to put up on the screen. So we're going to do a mini series and turn it into a series, you know, because we want to really tell the true story. I mean, I'm so tired of Hollywood doing their version of things. You know,
I was just going to ask you that.
Well, you take a look at, they just did The Irishman.
That's exactly, that was the one I was going to ask you about.
And I knew Frank Phelan very well. He was from Philly, and he was a driver for Jimmy Hoffa. He drove Jimmy Hoffa around. And he worked for Russell Buffalino, who I knew really well. He was a Western Pennsylvania guy. And Russell was a very politically oriented guy, very connected in Washington, and a very smart guy. Russell was a smart guy. In fact, you know, I used to tease him because we used to call him the when they had, they started the dating system where a guy came to your house with a little Kodak camera and took footage of somebody, and they put it on a process. They were putting a dating thing together. So we called him the Dating Don. He controlled all that. They made a lot of money doing it. It was a big deal. But Russell was a very entrepreneurial guy. He was kind of a good guy. I liked him a lot. He'd be turned over in his grave if you ever saw that film. And the way that they portrayed Frank to have killed Hoffa and killed Joey Gallo never happened.
I was going to ask you about that too.
Trust me when I tell you, he did not kill Jimmy Hoffa, and he had nothing to do with Joey Gallo's kill. Never happened. So Hollywood took liberties of answering questions that everybody's been asking, a $64 question, And believe me when I tell you, he didn't kill. And Frank was a good. Did he kill a few people? Yeah, he did. They did a book called Painting Houses, about. But no, he had nothing to do with Hoffa's death, other than driving something. He was involved in driving something somewhere. And and I knew Jimmy well. Jimmy was his own worst enemy when he came. Jimmy backed the wrong president, and what they put him in jail for was so stupid, so ludicrous. They said he stole $8,000 from the Teamsters pension fund to fix his house. Now, there was no pension fund before Hoffa. Hoffa created that pension fund. And trust me when I tell you, if Hoffa wanted something fixed at his house, there'd have been crews there fixing it for nothing. People loved Jimmy. Jimmy was a man's man, and he never would ask you to do what he couldn't do himself. So if Jimmy had something wrong in his house, he wanted to fix something, the guys would line up to go over there and just to be honored to do it. For them to say that he embezzled $8,000, that's the biggest bunch of bullshit I ever heard. And you're too young, but when Jimmy went to jail, every trucker lined up all the way up to Lewisburg, beeping their horns as he went by. And he was on the phone with some friends of mine from Boston right before he went to go turn himself in to Lewisburg. And he thought he would go in for maybe 3 or 4 months and they'd get him out. You know what I mean? But that didn't happen because he backed the wrong guy. And he spent the time he spent in there, but they told him in Boston, they said, Jimmy, you don't have to go to jail. Every Teamster in the country will walk off his job. And at that time, the country had made the transition from rail to truck. So if the Teamsters would have walked off their jobs, this country would have come to a standstill. Nothing would have moved. And Jimmy said, if I did the crime, I'll do the time. If they feel I did some crime, then I'll do the time. Because he thought he was going to walk in and walk out. And unfortunately, that's not what happened. And when he did come home, Fitzsimmons had already let the government into the Teamsters because they blew up his son's car and scared the shit out of him. And they were doing things that should have never been done. And they were, getting loans and stuff that should not have been granted, And when Jimmy came home and he walked right in his office and told Fitzsimmons, get out of my chair. And Fitzsimmons says, Jimmy, you're not allowed in here. You're going to get us in trouble, get us all locked up. You signed agreements stating that you would wait, and and he said, I'm taking my union back and I'm doing it today. Get out of my office. And then he got on the phone with New York and he got into an argument with a real serious guy in New York. And they kept saying to him, Jimmy, you're on the phone. Calm down. Everything will work out. You just got home. Let's just give it a little time. We'll sort it out. I don't want to hear that shit. I want my union back, and I want it back right now. Blah, 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 blah. He was so pent up and frustrated from the time he just spent in jail. And the conversation got on. The guy kept saying to him, Jimmy, you're on the phone. Just calm down. He said, well, you guys wanted loans from me for when they built Caesar's Palace and built Vegas up. But every loan they ever got from the Teamsters, they paid back. And they paid it back with the interest and everything else. So it was no hunky-dunky stuff there. And they told him, they said, Jimmy, you're on the phone, man. He said, I don't want to hear this bullshit. Then he made the worst statement he could have made. He said, I'm going to go to the press. They hung the phone up. And that was the end of Jimmy Hoffa.
What's something about Jimmy Hoffa that people don't probably know about other than what they've seen in film and read in books?
he was a very honest, straightforward individual. He was a man's man. In other words, he wouldn't ask you to drive a truck that he couldn't drive. He wouldn't ask you to, you got to stop and think about something. Before when Hoffa came into the Teamsters and formed the Teamsters and everything, these guys worked 18-hour days, and they loaded trucks and unloaded the trucks, and they got paid nothing. And he changed all that to where all they did was drive. They didn't have to unload or load anymore. They just drove to terminals, and that was all done by other people. All their job was driving. So you had guys that were lawyers that said, boy, I like this over-the-road job deal. And they were making $250,000 driving over the road. Out in the fresh air and the sunshine and all that shit. And they kind of like driving. So he changed a lot of people's lives, man, and created. And that's what scared the Kennedys, because he had such a voting power behind him. Jimmy controlled a lot of votes with the Teamsters and other unions that followed him. And he stood up for people. He took people's lives and he changed them to the better. If that makes any sense to you, he made people's lives a hell of a lot better than the guys weren't killing themselves and getting paid peanuts. He made them where they were being justifiably paid correctly for the jobs that they did. And, and did the Teamsters get a little bit too much power? Maybe in some ways they did. But that's in anything of that nature, But he pissed off the Kennedys because he owned a voting power and they couldn't control him. Bobby Kennedy told to piss off all the time. Bobby Kennedy was always, I'm going to put you in jail. Somebody said, yeah, get out of my face. He's always trying to find an angle to put him away for something. And he never really did anything wrong. What he could have done, it would have been atrocious. What people did after he went away, people took advantage of the Teamsters, something terrible. And it was just like with my father's thing. Before Albert's death, there was none of this hunky bullshit. After his death, everybody, whoa, we're going to steal this, steal that, boom, boom, boom. And who ratted on who and who did what, and everything fell apart. And that's what happened with Jimmy Hoffa. And it's unfortunate there was an era of time when the country was going through transitions. We went from the banking system, went from the gold standard to Federal Reserve. You had the miners were in an uprising in the Northeast. You had the Hoffa problem, and you had and the Kennedy problem. So you had all kinds of things. You had an Irish Catholic president in 1960 becoming president, which was a big controversial deal. So there was a lot of conflict in the country,
So
sad times. Boy.
Yeah. So outside of, like you were talking about at the top of this, with the direction that Superman is going right now with the book, what else are you up to nowadays?
We got this little picture I wrote back in when I first started, and I was doing King Kong, called The Informer, which was done by John Ford and Victor McLaughlin. He won 4 Oscars, and I wrote a script back then, and we're getting ready to we're going to do it now. Great Irish pictures. It's kind of cool. I think it's my Oscar, which I'm looking forward to doing the same role that Victor McLaughlin did.
So you get the Oscar, then you come back on here, and we'll chat again.
Why not?
Exactly.
But everything's good, it's things are. We got a couple more books we're going to write and tell a little bit more truth about things that happened in the country and turning of events. At the end of Family Legacy, we tell the truth about the Kennedy assassination, and it's time that people really learn the truth about certain things.
I cannot thank you enough for taking time to do this. This was crazy to sit here and talk to someone about everyone from Hoffa to Superman to Bruce Lee to Chuck Norris. This was a really cool experience for myself. And it was just great spending some time just sitting here talking to you. So go get that Oscar, and we'll definitely set this up and do this all over again.
Yeah, I hope your audience appreciates it.
Oh yeah, and definitely, and I'm sure I know my family, for one, we're big on the Comic-Con scene, so I'm definitely gonna have to run into you at one of these Comic-Cons and go over and get that face-to-face interaction we were talking about here. So
there you go.
So thank you so much for taking time to do this.
Take care. Have a great day.
You too, sir. Thank you very much. Hey, Shadows listeners. If you're looking to make some extra income that also impacts people, then you need to look at becoming a certified leadership coach with Giant. If you don't already know, Giant has been in the leadership space for over 13 years. I got certified through Giant in 2018, and I've been teaching ever since. Just to give you some context, they used to own and operate the John Maxwell brands. They ran the LeaderCast conferences where Jim Collins, Henry Cloud, Malcolm Gladwell, and Simon Sinek, just to name a few, were regular speakers. They have over 500 coaches worldwide, working in over 127 countries, and are being hired by companies like Google, Chick-fil-A, Pfizer, Delta, and more. And yes, you can do this too. I know this might sound intimidating, but Giant will literally give you everything you need to start your own coaching business from scratch. You get hands-on training from top-level coaches to learn the exact methodology and tools that six-figure coaches are using. You get an all-in-one online platform to run your entire coaching business, even if you want to work 100% remotely. And you'll get to join a thriving community of coaches from all around the world. To get started, Giant is hosting a coaching business workshop to help you learn the ins and outs of how to build a successful coaching business. This is both for experienced coaches, consultants, and those who are looking to start coaching and consulting with little to no experience. If you want to hear the really good news, this whole workshop, it's free, 100% free. And you can reserve your spot by going to giant.tv/shadows. Why not give it a shot? What's better than making a positive change in people's lives and making some extra money in the process? Giant launches a new hiring cohort every month. Now, they only have 20 coaching slots available each month, so it's first come, first serve. So go ahead and make sure you reserve your spot. If you're ready to make an impact and get paid doing it, go to giant.tv/shadows, giant.tv/shadows.